Welcome back. All right, 32 team video for all you fine people on the internet today. I've done a video on bounce back candidates, breakthroughs as well. So some of the names you're going to see on the board here are going to be repeated from there, but I'm going to explain why I am putting their name on the board now for this one. A video looking at players who I think could have a really strong start to the 2024-2025 season. And whether they do or they don't, we'll see. But these are players who I think could have a strong start, and I've got my reasons. So hopefully you guys will follow along and understand those reasons when they come up. For Detroit, which is of course the team I'm wearing here, Patrick Kane in 50 games had 20 goals, 27 assists, 47 points. At this stage of his career, I think a strong start to the season is important. Again, considering the hip surgery that he had that led to him only playing 50 games of this past season, you want to go out, show the hip's fine, and show that you feel good. And with older players, you can see them get off to strong starts to the season and then slow down a little bit later on, and maybe that happens with Kane. But I think he's going to have a strong start. For Boston, this one I went back and forth a little bit on, but I'm going with Jonas Korpisalo, and I'll say why. So right now, we do not have Jeremy Swayman signed as a Boston Bruins goaltender for this coming season. Jonas Korpisalo can be a good goaltender. He's coming off of a down year where he had an .890 save percentage for Ottawa and just did not play up to that contract and ends up now in Boston. Of course, Olmark's over in Ottawa. But I do think that Korpisalo is capable of a bounce back. I think he's capable of a strong start, especially if Swayman's not signed to start the season. So that's why I'm putting Korpisalo up there as well. For New Jersey, I think that we're going to see a really strong start from Jack Hughes. I think after an injury-riddled campaign where he played 62 games, 27 goals, 47 assists, 74 points, and just not the kind of totals that we expected from him this past season because of injury, I think he could have a really strong start to this season. Not only that, but New Jersey themselves could have a really strong start to the season, and that could benefit Jack Hughes as well. All right, for the LA Kings, I thought a little bit outside the box with the Kings. I'm going with Laferriere. So we've talked about the Kings this offseason a few times and how maybe they're going to be a team that ends up dropping out of the playoffs with the moves that got made and other teams in the West. But there's room there for another top six winger. There's room on this team right now as I'm recording this on August the 25th for a top six winger. Laferriere, young player, really strong work ethic. I could see him getting off to a strong start of the season and trying to force them to keep him in that top six. So maybe it's just me rooting for Laferriere, but there he is on the board. For Toronto, I think this one's obvious. Who's the new captain in Toronto? Austin Matthews. 81 games, 69 goals, 38 assists, 107 points. I think there's going to be a lot of motivation for Matthews going into this season. We know that Tavares is in the last year of his contract. We know Marner's in the last year of his contract. And I debated about putting up either Marner or Tavares since they're in contract years. But Matthews, that 69 goals he had last season, he's going to look to jump right out and start scoring all those goals again. And he's usually a very strong starter to the season. So my guess, I had to go with Matthews. It's just one of those ones where I could have tried to go with somebody else and come up with a clever reason, but kind of has to be Matthews. For San Jose, young player who should have at least a better chance this season. So for Eklund, 80 games, 16 goals, it's 29 assists, right? Yep, 29 assists, 45 points. And for Eklund, it does feel like he's ready to, hit that trajectory and maybe get off to a really strong start. San Jose had a nightmare start this past season, but now this season, you could have two scoring lines with San Jose, and if Eklund's on that second line, he'll get away from top pairings, because those top pairings will be worried about the other line, which could have Macklin and Celebrini on it. Maybe Eklund ends up on Celebrini's line, and if he does, we could see his points totals go up due to that as well. So that 45 points in 80 games, I think that's going to be a low mark. I think he's only going to go higher from here. And I could see a really strong start for Eklund and maybe a decent start for the Sharks as well. Anything better than last year, and last year was pretty bad for San Jose to start things off. For Winnipeg, I'm going with a player I've talked about before in this offseason, but I think Cole Perfetti is going to get every opportunity to succeed. And I think that with a new coach behind the bench and a fresh season, Perfetti could become a pretty strong player for them right out of the gate. So Perfetti's my pick for a guy who could have a pretty strong start to the season for Winnipeg. I think there's going to be a lot of motivation. Now, right now, he's not signed. So he has to be signed for this to work. For Dallas, he's not writing Wyatt Johnston's name. Oh, he's writing Wyatt Johnston's name. Why is he always writing Wyatt Johnston's name? Because Wyatt Johnston's an excellent player. 82 games, 32 goals, 33 assists, 65 points. And what we saw from him in the playoffs, this kid's going to be a superstar in the National Hockey League. Robertson and Hintz have got a lot of attention. They're still young players, but I think Johnston could be the guy. Maybe the future captain for this team when Jamie Benn's time as captain's done. He's that good. And Wyatt Johnston alone shows just how smart their scouting staff is. And now, Maverick Bourque could be coming up. We know Stankoven's going to be on the team. Dallas is going to be a good young team, and they look like they're going to be a strong team for years to come. Nashville, I had to go with Stamkos, didn't I? I mean, when you think about it, Stamkos is in a new location. There should be a lot of excitement around him joining the Tampa Bay, or leaving the Tampa Bay Lightning to go to Nashville. 79 games, 40 goals, 41 assists, 81 points for Stamkos in Tampa last season. I think he could get off to a really strong start for Nashville. Again, he's an older player, so maybe he gets off to a strong start and fades a little bit later in the season. But he should have great motivation coming into the start of the season to prove that he's a bit older, but he can still play. His shot's still excellent. And yeah, I think that amount of, I don't want to say pressure, because I don't necessarily think it's like pressure, he has to make it, but I think he's going to want to show, hey, I can do this without Kucherov, I can do this on my own, and could lead to a really strong start. For Vancouver, I wish I could put Demko, but we don't know if he's going to start the season for Vancouver. So I'm going with Pettersson, only because I don't know that Shilovs is in a position where I could put him up here as a guy who's going to have a really strong start. But Pettersson had a good first half to the season. He had a rough second half. I would think if he's 100% healthy this season, and that's a question mark. One thing for this Vancouver Canucks team right now, you do have Pettersson, who gets injured a lot. You have Demko, who has struggles with injuries as well. I hope this doesn't hurt this core to the point where, maybe Vancouver's window doesn't stay open that long in terms of being a contender. But 82 games, 34 goals, 55 assists, 89 points for Pettersson last year. I think he's capable of getting back into that 100-plus point range. And to get there, he's going to need a really strong start, which I think he can achieve. Now we get to Vegas. For Vegas, I'm going with Stone, who will not start the season on LTIR. They don't need him on LTIR anyways. They need him on the ice. 16 goals, 37 assists, 53 points in 56 games. Stone needs to play more, and he needs to play well, and he's capable of scoring a bunch of points. I think that gets overlooked because he's so good defensively and because he's on the injured list a lot, but he is also a very good scorer, good instincts at both ends of the ice, and I would look to see him at least back in the top 5 for the Selke this season. If not, Vegas could have a season that sees them miss the playoffs. And Stone has also been very vocal in the media about how everybody wants to see Vegas fail, and he understands how important this upcoming season is. Pittsburgh, I went with Erik Karlsson. Again, I know Karlsson on the older side of things too, but for Karlsson this past season, 82 games, 11 goals, 45 assists, 56 points. Now maybe the fact that you have Letang and Karlsson splitting the minutes means Karlsson's never getting back to the totals like he put up in San Jose before joining the Penguins. But I think a strong start for Karlsson's important. I think a strong start for the Penguins is important because of all the questions about their age, because they've missed the playoffs in back-to-back years. They need to have that really good start, and Karlsson having a strong start would go a long way to making that happen. For Chicago, I'm going with the now apparently healthy Taylor Hall, who only played 10 games, had 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points this past season. He's still Taylor Hall. He can still play. And for Chicago, a team that, much like San Jose, I think will have a much better start this season compared to last season. They're still not going to be a playoff team, but they should be better. Hall could be a big part of that. Hall was brought in to mentor Bedard. So if Hall's healthy to start training camp, and if he starts on the Bedard line, let's say you have Hall on one side, Bertuzzi on the other, just as an example, it should lead to some points for Hall early in the season, because Bedard showed this past season he can get points out of players. He absolutely can. He can get those guys points. much like some of the other greats around the National Hockey League. Bedard already showing some of that. For the Edmonton Oilers, I went with Zach Hyman for the Edmonton Oilers. I feel like coming off of an 84-goal season, 84-goal season, 54-goal season, 80 games played. That's where I just mixed the two numbers up. It's fine. We'll just say 84. Nobody will even notice. But 23 assists, 77 points. I think for Hyman, coming off that 54-goal season, you want another 50-goal season. So don't be surprised if Hyman gets a bunch of goals early on again. He has this ability to read the ice, this ability to be exactly where he needs to be, and so that's getting him the goals. I don't see any reason why that's going to change. He could have a dynamite start for the Edmonton Oilers. For Montreal, I went with Slafkovsky. Again, he had a very good second half of the season. He's going to want to continue that this season. Played all 82 games this past year, 20 goals, 30 assists, 50 points. And he's got his big fresh new contract right now, so you got your new contract. You don't have to worry. That's one less concern. Slafkovsky can just go out and play hockey. And he knows the team has faith in him because he sees what those checks are worth. At least I think those checks start next year, right? Not this year. But either way, you know what you're going to be getting, and that's got to mean something. So Slafkovsky, with the confidence of the team behind him, with every opportunity to succeed, and there should be better teammates as well, he could have a really strong start to the year. For Anaheim, we talk a lot about Trevor Zegras, but I'm going to say this. If we get to the start of the season and he's in their starting lineup, Zegras is capable of a lot more than what he's shown lately. 6 goals, 9 assists, 15 points in 31 games this past season. No puck luck for him this past season, and obviously injuries. So if he can stay healthy, he could have a very strong start to the season. He is a very supremely talented player. I know that there are some who just see him as a hot dog player and not necessarily one that has any kind of a rounded game. But for Zegras, I think he's still got that potential to be an excellent player. And for the Ducks, Zegras could be pulled up a bit because I think they're going to be a better offensive team in general this season, which should help Zegras' totals. For Colorado, do you believe Georgiev's in a contract year? He's coming off of a season where he had an .897 save percentage, and he's coming off of a playoffs where he was very hot and cold. He's going to want to get off to a good start. Pressure the Colorado Avalanche into signing you to an extension, or at the very least show that you're an excellent goaltender, and if Colorado decides at the end of the season they want to look in another direction, you won't have a problem finding a suitor if you're Georgiev. So I think there's a lot of pressure there with him. I also think he's capable of a bounce back from what was a relatively rough season for him. For Calgary, I don't know how many times I'm going to write this name on the board with the idea that maybe now he's going to start producing. But I'm going to put Huberdeau on the board again because why not? 52 points, 12 of those goals in 81 games this past season. It's just not enough. Huberdeau's capable of more. Now, maybe his totals got pushed up by playing in Florida and playing on the exact right lines. Maybe that benefited him. But his numbers in Calgary have been too low. He's definitely better than a 52-point player. And I think a really strong start to the season would go a long way. Plus, for the Flames, it's important that somebody gets off to a strong start because there's no expectations. Maybe no expectations will help Huberdeau's totals as well. The pressure comes off at least a little bit, right? For Seattle, I thought about Wright and writing up Beniers. I'm kind of like, you know what? I'm gonna go back on this a little bit because Beniers may very well have a strong start to the season based on his new contract. But I'm going to go with Shane Wright because this should be the year that Shane Wright finally gets. And notice I just remember the numbers: 8 games, 4 goals, 1 assist, 5 points. This should be the year that Wright's in their lineup every night. Ron Francis has gradually brought him along. This should be a big year for him. If Shane Wright's going to prove that he should have been taken first in his draft year, this is the season where that potential starts to shine through and we start to see that player at the NHL level. So I'm going to use Wright for Seattle. I've changed my mind at the very last moment. For Minnesota, I won't change my mind with this one. So when a player has a really strong rookie season, what's one of the first things people bring up? He has to avoid the sophomore jinx. Brock Faber will be trying to avoid the sophomore jinx. And as a defenseman, it can happen. 82 games, 8 goals, 39 assists, 47 points. One name that sticks out in my memory is Michael Del Zotto. Had an excellent rookie season, looked fantastic, and after that, not as good. Dion Phaneuf had a fantastic season with Calgary initially, and then couldn't really follow that up. So for Brock Faber, he had 47 points in 82 games, was their best defenseman last year on a defense that includes Jonas Brodin. I think he was still the best one of the bunch, and now he needs to show he can do it 2 years in a row. So maybe he has a really strong start to the season. Say the first 10 games, he has 8 points, that kind of strong start. For Philadelphia, I went off the board a little bit and putting Bobby Brink's name on the board. He played 57 games this past season, 11 goals, 12 assists, 23 points. If Brink's going to stay in the lineup and play a lot for Philadelphia, he's going to have a strong start to get there. And I think he's got the talent to do it. So 11 goals, 12 assists, 23 points in 57 games for Brink this past season. I'll say that if he plays 82 games, he easily doubles those totals. And I would love to see him do that. So, Brink is my pick for Philadelphia. For the New York Islanders, this one was relatively easy because there's one player who I think had, by his standards, a disappointing season, and that's Ilya Sorokin, who had a .909 save percentage, and Varlamov took his job. So there should be a lot of motivation for Sorokin this year to come in and be focused and play his best game. So if Varlamov can play the same as he did last year and Sorokin has a big bounce back, the Islanders are going to be tough because you've got Patrick Roy behind the bench. So if their goaltending's excellent and if Roy can really keep that defense tight, the Islanders could really do a good job of keeping the goals against down, maybe a Jennings in their future. For the Washington Capitals, so the Caps have had issues with scoring. And I'm just going to say I think Connor McMichael is a very talented forward who's due to break through and maybe a really strong start for him. 18 goals, 15 assists, 33 points in 80 games. And I think we've just scratched the surface with McMichael. And with Ovechkin clearly winding down at least a bit, he's getting near 40, right? You want to see somebody else sort of pick up that mantle from a scoring perspective. I think McMichael's capable of it. But that strong start to the season could get him there. The other name I thought about putting up there was Strome, only because Strome's looking forward to maybe getting Ovechkin those goals. And maybe Ovechkin can have a good start to this season where he didn't last year, but I'm going to go with McMichael. But you can see that there are a few potential candidates there. For Buffalo, kind of has to be Tage Thompson, doesn't it? Tage Thompson, 71 games, 29 goals, 27 assists, 56 points. His numbers respectable this past season, but if Buffalo's going to get to a playoff spot, they need the goal scoring to come up. And Tage Thompson, his goal scoring was not where it was the previous season, so he's going to need to be better. Maybe he has a really strong start out of the gate. He did that a couple years ago and rode that to almost a 50-goal season, so we'll see if he can do that this year. For Ottawa, there was only one candidate for Ottawa in my eyes, and that's Tim Stützle. He knows he had a down year. He's been very vocal about not being happy with his play the past season. He had 18 goals, 52 assists, 70 points in 78 games. But the 18 goals is way too low. So I'd be very surprised if Stützle doesn't have, by the end of October, 8 goals. I'll say 8 goals in October for Stützle. I would not be surprised. He's a much better goal scorer than 18 goals in 78 games. That's ridiculously low for him. For the New York Rangers, one option to me for the Rangers, and I apologize that I have this name on the board as much as I do, but Lafreniere, it feels like it's time. It's time for him to get those top minutes, for him to get the top unit on the power play time as well. 28 goals, 29 assists, 57 points in 82 games last year for Lafreniere, and I could see him being a point-per-game player this season. So, could be a really strong start for him, and if you're playing fantasy, he's a player who might be around a little bit longer because 57 points doesn't really jump out at you, but there's that point-per-game potential. I really believe that he has that, and the New York Rangers may very well give him the amount of ice time where he can get there this year. For Utah, and keep in mind that with Utah, of course, technically expansion, blah, blah, blah. But from the Arizona Coyotes, they acquire Logan Cooley just because he moved with the team. 82 games, 20 goals, 24 assists, 44 points. Cooley looked really, really good at the end of last season. He plays like a veteran already, and I'd be very surprised if he's not a point-per-game player, at least through the first quarter of the season. Looking at Utah and looking at how the NHL is promoting them, I did notice through the NHL shop site that they have Cooley stuff, like stuff with Cooley's name on the back and Keller's right away. And I was like, yep, those are the first, being the first two guys they put names on the backs of t-shirts and whatnot. Makes sense, because I think Logan Cooley, lots of potential. And so we could see him double his point total this year. I think he could do that. Playing in Utah should help, because again, there's no stress of what's going to happen tomorrow. Are we still going to be here? All right, for Columbus, this is a name I've talked about before. I'll talk about it again, and I'll explain it. So in the offseason, they signed Sean Monahan, right? So what that's designed to do is get Johnny Gaudreau scoring again. Now, he had 12 goals, 48 assists, 60 points in 81 games. It's been a disaster for Johnny Gaudreau thus far in Columbus, but that disaster can absolutely be not forgotten, but at least it can quiet down a little bit in terms of our discussion of it if he has a strong start to the season playing on a line with Sean Monahan again, right? So we'll see if that happens, but they could get off to a strong start. Again, this video is about guys who could get off to strong starts. I could see Johnny Gaudreau having a strong start to the season. Whether it's sustainable through 82 games, we'll see, but I could see Johnny Gaudreau having a strong start. For St. Louis, another player who signed a long-term extension this summer and is getting paid, and that's Pavel Buchnevich. What's interesting with Buchnevich is that his totals don't necessarily jump out at you that much. 27 goals, 36 assists, 63 points in 80 games. I think he's capable of point per game, at least through the first couple months of the season. And again, you have a St. Louis team that's excited because they added Broberg, they added Holloway, they think management has faith in them. You have a team that struggled to score this past season with players we know can score. And Buchnevich, to me, headlines the players that look like they have the talent to get a lot more goals than what they've had this past year or two. And so we'll see what happens there. For Florida, so Florida fans at the end of the year were pretty sure that Forsling would be, at least in the hunt for the Norris Trophy, and they weren't happy about it. Forsling ended up with a plus 56. 10 goals, 29 assists, 39 points in 79 games. His points totals don't jump out at you, but the plus-minus does. Now, I'm going to say that with Forsling and the amount of talent he's had, plus they just won a Stanley Cup, and then with changes on the blue line, this might be the year Forsling gets off to a really good start offensively. And so if the offensive numbers come up into the 55, 60 point range, and he's still putting up like a plus 56 type plus-minus rating, then we'll see him near the top in terms of Norris voting. And I don't know if he necessarily wins it, but if he gets more points, it'll definitely help his stock there. For Tampa Bay, to me there was only one pick for Tampa Bay, and this should be kind of obvious after I had Stamkos up there, but I do think that Jake Gensel is going to be the guy to watch. Early in the season especially, this past season he had 30 goals, 47 assists, 77 points in 67 games. He's going to be playing with Kucherov. There should be a lot of confidence there. He got his new contract. He's going to want to prove he's worth it. I think Jake Gensel gets off to a really strong start to the season. So that's my prediction anyways. You guys can let me know too who you think could get off to a really strong start this year. You can go with the obvious and just go with like Crosby and McDavid and Matthews. Who would pick Matthews for Toronto? That's crazy. Anyways, Carolina. And yep. I'm beating a what horse? It's not dead. Kotkaniemi, 79 games, 12 goals, 15 assists, 27 points. Look, Kotkaniemi had a decent start last season. Couldn't keep that going through the whole season. I'll go ahead and go out on a limb and say he could have another good start this season. I don't know if he can maintain it. I don't know if he can go a full 82 games and produce. I think he desperately needs to. I think in order for that contract to continue on, I think it's important he has a strong season, but we'll see. We'll see what happens with Kotkaniemi with the Carolina Hurricanes. But there you go. 32 players, 32 teams. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.